For part 2, we're going to go over a bit of actually running code. So we had our variables down. Now we're going to run some code and see what we can do. Maybe display some text to the screen. And for that, let's go to the lesson 3 area for the trigger setup, because that's the easiest way to figure this stuff out. So over here we have an auto run thing, and that just makes the trigger automatically run, so like run it map initialization. So that's pretty nice. Here we can type out conditions, actions. Let's not worry about initialization for now, or timed code. And so let's go to the actions area and start up our first action. Now when you run an action, it's called calling code. So you need what's called the call keyword, and then you can call whatever code you want, and those pieces of code are called functions. And if we go to the GUI really fast when we have actions and we add a new action, for example, animation, reset unit, let's not do that one. Cinematic clear text messages, when we add that, that's actually calling a function. So this line here is a function call. So let's do something similar. Let's actually clear text messages. So we're going to call a function. And we need the function name. So let's go into the function list to find that. And I'm just going to look it up here. Clear text. Oh, right there. Clear text messages. So there's the name. And then this other stuff tells you its arguments and what it gives back. So if we look over here, here are the arguments there. So clear the screen of text messages for all players. There's your argument. If we look at another one, pause this timer. And so we have 2 arguments there. So it's pretty similar. So if we start typing clear text messages, there it is. We can double click that. Then to actually give it the arguments, the things we want, we have to do an open parentheses right here. Open. And in here it'll tell us what it takes. It doesn't take anything, so we don't put anything in there. Then we do close parentheses. So in between these 2 parentheses are all of the arguments. And then we can do save it, and it'll save, and we can run it. It's not really going to do anything because there aren't any text messages up, but there it is. So why not, how about displaying some text? And for this I'm going to use a custom function I made. We're going to go ahead and call that, and it's located in the core. Right there, function print. And it takes a string and doesn't return anything. Don't worry about what it does yet. Just know that it displays something. And let's go ahead and do what's called commenting. And what commenting does is essentially ignore an entire line of code. So everything from the 2 slashes onwards is ignored. And notice that's colored in green to show that's ignored. So I can type whatever I want there and it's not going to do anything. And out here if I type stuff before the 2 slashes, it will be in black text. That means it's actual code. It's not commented out. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. And comments, by the way, are normally used for debugging things. If you don't want a line of code to run anymore, you can just comment it out. Or they're used for writing notes. For example, this note actions, this note conditions, this note events. You actually have 2 types of comments. You have single line comments with the 2 slashes, and then you have what are called delimited comments. Those start with a /*, and they end with a //. And everything in between here is commented. So I can type out whatever I like here and it will be commented, and I can save it and go look at all the pretty comments. And with these kinds you can actually nest them, so that's pretty neat. So I can do another comment, so I have a comment. And those are useful if, for example, you have a huge block of code, and then you want to comment that whole block of code out, and then you have other blocks of code around them. You want to comment all these out, but you want to keep this code blocked out. And also notice that this is not colored correctly, and that's just the highlighter failing at highlighting. So it's actually commented, it's just not highlighting right. And if we save it, it's nested correctly. And normally you will tab inside these blocks to make it easier to read. You don't have to. But then if you want to uncomment this, these two blocks of code get uncommented, this one stays commented, so it is really nice for debugging. Other languages like C++ do not support nested comments, so if you did something like this, it would run into this / right here and it will go, oh, we're closing the comment now. And then it would run into this one and goes, oh, the comment's closed, this is a syntax error, this is random text. So C++ is kind of sad in that it doesn't support it. Anyways, now that we've commented out clear text messages, let's go ahead and display some text using the print function. And we're going to use the call keyword to call that. And then we're going to type print, and then open parentheses to start our little arguments there. And now it doesn't show anything. It doesn't show it what it takes. And the reason for this is because the print function is not a native. It's a function and it's a custom one that was written by me. If we go into the function list, this is a native and it's actually part of Warcraft 3. There are other things that are actually functions that show up, and they're called vjass. Like right here, notice that it's in red text, it has function in front of it. So that's just function actual JAS code. It's not C++ interface thingy like the natives are. And the GUI just uses these vjass here, these functions, and some of them are pretty nasty, and that's why a lot of people already dislike the GUIs, just for this reason alone. And some of these contain lots of memory leaks. I mean, look at this one here. This is just madness. And yes, madness. So we're going to call the print function, and it takes a string. And for strings, we start with double quote, end it with double quote. And let's go ahead and look there. 2 double quotes. And then we do close parentheses to end the function. Then we type in our little message here like, hello world. That's a pretty cliche one, but it works. Notice how it's colored. That's the coloring of a string. So let's go ahead and run that. We always have to save before running a map. If we don't save, then it'll just pop into the Warcraft 3 main menu, and that'll be that. And this should display hello world right there. And then we can put our clear text messages back in and save that. And now it will get rid of the hello world message. And now there's nothing there because it got rid of it. So let's go ahead and write something in the timed code really fast. So as we see here, this code will run every second. So let's go ahead and put the clear text messages up. And now the hello world message will be displayed for 1 second and then it'll clear out. Let's change this to 5 seconds, because 1 second isn't really all that long. So there's hello world. And now it just went away. And that's all there really is to calling functions in natives. So it's not all that difficult. It works just like actions. You just have to use the call keyword, the function name, open parentheses, close parentheses, and then there you pass your arguments. And so you, for example, if it took an integer, you give it a 15 or something, or some sort of variable. What if it took multiple arguments? Well, for those, use a commas. So that would be 3 arguments right there, 1, 3, 5. The commas separate out the arguments, so it's sort of like a list separated by commas. So if we wanted to do something like create unit, there it is, open parentheses. Here it shows each different value it takes, the value type, and the name. The name doesn't really matter, but it just it tells you what it should refer to. For example, this is an integer, but not only is it an integer, it refers to the unit ID, or it should. If you gave it like a 5 or something, it wouldn't like that very much because that's not a unit ID. Then here we have the x and y, so that's x coordinate, y coordinate, the location right there. And then there's the facing, which is in degrees, from 0 to 360 degrees. So let's go ahead and create a unit here. Now this does not take an integer, it takes a player. For that we're going to have to use another native. So yes, natives do return things, like this one here returns a unit. So I could actually set a variable to this, but I'm not going to. And you can also pass those return values into other natives, so I'm going to call another native here called player. What that does is it converts an integer, the player ID, into the player. So I'm going to pass in 0. Players actually go from 0 to 15, not 1 through 16. The GUI adds 1 to the player IDs. So player 0 is the first player, it's red. And that just all disappeared, so let's bring that all back up. Now here is the unit ID. And there are actually 3 ways to input integers into Warcraft 3. The first way is plain old integers like that. The second way is hexadecimal integers. That might be familiar to you web devs out there. It's the same idea. And the third way is ASCII integers. And ASCII is like the characters that make up a string, like A, C, D. Those are ASCII characters. ASCII values can either be 1 or 4 digits, and as the name suggests, you pass in ASCII characters. And they are surrounded by single quotes. And as you see, it's in black and bold and underlined, so that shows you it's an ASCII character. We could either pass in something like A, which gets the ASCII value for A, whatever that is, and we can look it up in the ASCII table if we want to find out what that value is. And here is A. So that would be 997 right there. And if we wanted to, we could even comment this out and print it out. So call print. And we're going to use another native here, I2S. That's integer to a string. Takes an integer, converts it to a string. And I'm going to display A, and that should show 97. And there it is, 97. So let's get rid of that, and we're going to move on. So it wants a unit ID. Now, what exactly is a unit ID? Well, we can go to the object editor and try to figure that out. So here we have a peasant, a footman. Let's go to view, display values as raw data, because that'll show us the actual object ID. And we can either do that by clicking this button here, or we can use the Control-D shortcut, and I'm going to use Control-D. So there it is, HPEA. Notice it's a 4-value code. It's an ASCII integer. So if we pass that in, there's the unit ID, and we can go back. So let's give it a peasant then. So right there, there's a peasant. If you don't know how to read these, there's H for human and PEA for peasant. So that's why they use ASCII integers there. Then we're going to give it 0, 0, and give it a facing of 270. So this will make it at the coordinate 0, 0, which is around here. So now let's go ahead and save that, and we should have the peasant on the map now. And sure enough, there is the peasant. And let's exit out. So there is an introduction to calling natives and custom functions. And BJs work the same way. They're literally just custom functions that Blizzard made. If I actually type one in here like create n units at loc, that's a BJ function right there, made by Blizzard, and notice it's in red. You should never use anything that's in red. Get rid of it and replace it with stuff that's in purple. And if we actually look through this, we would see a whole lot of bad code. So that's why you should never use anything in red. Some modders do because some of them are okay, but it's just better not to use any of them. And that ends this part of the tutorial.